everything's fine on Channel 89. WLS in Chicago. Personality.
You worked with Sam Holman.
Yes, I did. In Milwaukee at WRIT. Well, he later became the program director of WLS in Chicago. Called me one day and said, "It's time to pay you back. I want you to be the all-night man on WLS. Can you get down here today?" Rich, there are still 4 sets of tire marks on I-94 in Milwaukee where I just burned rubber to get down to Chicago and be on the air.
I was a teenager in Milwaukee in the summers of 1958 and 59, and I often listened to Clark Weber when he was the all-night man on WRIT. I even called into his show a few times, and I finally got to meet him. The station was kind of off by itself in an odd location, and a friend and I were hanging around outside one night. We had no business being there, and someone else might have called the police, but Clark invited us in and showed us around.
Hi, everybody. This is Mother Weber's oldest son, Clark, on the old sounds of Channel 89 radio, and we'd like to pause right about now and say hello to a group of friends of ours that are holed up at Bruce's place tonight. The entire gang throwing the cash party from the Evanston Township High School. Gang, many happy returns of the evening to you, and hope you enjoy this sound.
1960. It's now or never.
I was one of the people who said it wasn't going to work. So much for what I knew. I knew Gene Taylor and Sam Holman in Milwaukee. And when they told me they were coming down here to turn the Prairie Farmer into a rock and roll station, I said, "You guys are nuts."
Don't make it fine.
Sock hops were our lifeblood because we covered such a large area. And in those days, there wasn't even a telephone in the studio. So you didn't have that feedback from the audience, and the way in which you got it was to go out in the hinterlands and actually get out there and boogie with them.
It was my pleasure to work with Clark on his show during his stay at WMAQ AM in Chicago, and I must say that he was irrepressible, always smiling, always full of joy and energy, and making everybody around him feel good.
Hi, Clark. This is Gary Loizo from The American Breed. And I'd just like to give you a big thank you from all of us in The American Breed for helping get our career going. Back in 1966, when you saw us at McCormick Place and you told your friend Bill Trout about us, it's all bend me, shape me history from there. They couldn't have picked a better man for this broadcasting award.
Way back when I saw this guy at NBC walking down the hallway, and I said, "Can I help you?" And he says, "Yeah, I'm looking for Studio G." I says, "Oh, and you might be?" And he says, "I'm Clark Weber." And I says, "Clark Weber, you can't be. I grew up listening to you, and I'm 70 years old."
When you started talking about the 40s and 50s, I thought you were going to tell people you grew up with me.
Clark, I grew up as a fan of yours. I checked Clark's shoes to see if he's been out in the barnyard getting...
I scraped them off before I came in here.
Listen, I can remember as a kid, I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and you would zero in on WLS or WCFL, and you would listen to people like Clark or Dick Biondi or any of several other names that were big in the 50s.
Why don't we all make Clark feel old now and say, okay, I grew up listening to Clark too.
What breaks me up, though, Bob, is the woman who walks up to me with her arm full of children and says, "Do you remember me from 1960 at New Trier High School?"
Phyllis, we've got to talk.
Uh-huh.
I'd like to wake up with somebody else tomorrow.
Who'd you have in mind?
Clark Weber.
Clark Weber?
Yeah, WIND, Talk Radio 56.
Clark Weber?
He's a funny guy. And WIND's got all the news, weather, traffic, too.
You know?
Oh, you'll love WIND.
I'd love to wake up with Clark Weber.
Wake up with me on WIND, Talk Radio 56.
I've got a story about Clark Weber. It was somewhere around 1980, 1981. Clark was working at WIND in Chicago, and I was at WJJD. I was assigned to do a remote broadcast on a Saturday morning from the Cadillac dealership in downtown Chicago. And I get there, and Clark is doing a remote from WIND. And it was a lengthy remote. And at the end of the day, we had only 3 listeners show up to our remote. That's it, 3 listeners. So just before I left, I went over to Clark, and I said to Clark, "Clark?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I want you to know one thing." He said, "What's that?" I said, 2 of those listeners were mine. This is Denny Farrell wishing you the best.
Ladies and gentlemen, Clark Weber gives great radio on
WCFL Chicago.
Hey, Baldy Locks, it's me, Ron Riley, your nemesis from the 60s radio in Chicago. The Illinois broadcasters have brought you down for an event tonight, huh? What were they thinking? Oh my, Cluck, you and I ran around like our hair was on fire over the years, having a great time, and I was going to fly in for this tonight, especially from the East Coast, but I just couldn't stand the thought of seeing you there looking like a penguin in a tuxedo. So in the interim, I'm going to just say this way, congratulations to you, seriously, good radio, good guy, and a good honor. Thanks to the broadcasters from my home state of Illinois, and have a good night tonight. Take care.
W